The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Game Podcast Network is brought to you by Onyx Fantasy. Sign up with the promo code SGPN to get a 50% deposit bonus up to $1,000. Brought to you by Rhythm. Start crushing college football and the NFL with Rhythm. Get your 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgame.com, which is RATHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Game Podcast Network. It's currently Thursday evening, roughly 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on October 3rd. I'm your host, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to get into the second round of Shanghai. So we're going to get into a decent amount of the second round matches. Not all of them, too many to cover. We are going to cover a decent amount of them. Then we're going to share our lock and dog picks, favorite plays at the end of the show. However, for that, though, do want to recap what happened in the last episode and what happened in Beijing for that final. Starting off with the usual housekeeping, do want to remind everyone that you can show support by liking and subscribing on YouTube to the channel. And a reminder, don't forget to rate the podcast on Spotify or Apple if you're still listening to the podcast audio only. So in addition to the live stream and, of course, the YouTube video after the fact, you can still listen to it audio only on Spotify or Apple. So once again, if you're still doing it that way, that's fine. But please leave a rating and review. And if you're still here on YouTube, welcome back, and hopefully you enjoy the show. Don't forget, though, to leave some feedback. You'd also leave a comment, or you could even hop in the live stream for a comment there. But don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, a reminder, check out the SGPN merch store. A lot of great Tennis Game Podcast merch. We have sweatshirts, t-shirts, and mugs, all affordable and very comfortable. So I recommend getting yourself something from the actual merch store. Not just for this show, but also for the other shows with the network. A couple of those shows also have some pregame shows on the weekend. So, for example, SGPN does have the most degen pregame shows in the world. Saturday, the College Experience on YouTube is live at around 11 a.m. Eastern. And the NFL, you have the Propcast at 11 a.m. And you also have SGP, which is live at noon. So if you do want your last-second bets, your degen parlays, and more, you can definitely go on those channels for YouTube, and you can definitely find a lot of great content. Plus, a reminder, we are doing a fundraiser for Hurricane Helene, as it's been devastating to the people of Western North Carolina. SGPN's teaming up with a local charity, the mountainprojects.org. So mountainprojects.org to help give back. Biggest donation. We'll get a guest spot on the College Football Pick Show. And a reminder, they also get a ton of gear. Go to mountainprojects.org and hit flood support. Help out today. Thank you in advance. Anyway, time to get into the actual recap of what happened for the last couple episodes. So we're going to do the good news first, then we'll do the bad news second. Ended up sweeping the final in Beijing. For the lock, we had Alcaraz money line at minus 125. Definitely not easy, but he got there. For the dog, nice winner, as we had Alcaraz and Sinner over half a tie break, and they overachieved. They ended up having two separate tie breaks. Never in doubt, first I went to a breaker, so pretty sweat-free there. Alcaraz, though, really didn't exactly have the easiest go of it, but he ended up getting the job done, as we ended up seeing Alcaraz, who should have won the first set. He was up a break in the first set. He choked it when he was serving it out, and then he eventually lost the first set via tiebreak. Came back, won the second set with a break there at the end, and then held on to win in the third set. I believe it was down 3-0, I want to say, in the final set breaker, and he won the last 7 points. Either way, though, nice winner. Alcaraz looked like the best player in the field for the entire event. Sinner, who had been looking a bit vulnerable for the first couple rounds, did raise his level. I thought he looked really good against Sinner. Unfortunately, though, not good enough, as Alcaraz just made a few too many shots down the stretch en route to a nice win there. So once again, Alcaraz is 3-0 against Sinner this season. Beat him, of course, in Beijing. Beat him in the French Open, and he also beat him in Indian Wells. So overall, good year for Alcaraz on the head-to-head. He's currently 3-0, and all three of those matches ended up going to a deciding set. So still a lot of drama when these two get together, but Alcaraz has definitely gotten the better of Sinner in most of their head-to-head meetings. We'll see if that continues later on this year and into the rest of their careers. Anyway, time to recap what happened in the last episode for Shanghai. Unfortunately, I said it was the bad news. The good news was sweeping Beijing. The bad news is we were awful with the lock and dog picks for the first round in Shanghai. For the lock, had Busta, plus half a game at minus 120. Still love the price on that. It felt like one offshore book went a bit rogue. However, it didn't matter, as you saw Dzancho play extremely well. I would say that Dzancho basically turned the clock back to his match against Alcaraz in the U.S. Open. He'd been really bad before that, and he was really bad after that. But for one day, he regained his entire form, as Dzancho was really, really good. He played like a top 20 player in the world. I thought Busta was actually fine. I don't think Busta played that badly. He had a break point in the first set that he couldn't convert on, eventually double faulted in the tiebreak, which kind of put him behind, but he was able to make it interesting. But the Dzancho really couldn't miss for about 2 hours. It felt like the Dzancho was just fully dialed in. Busta played fine, but the Dzancho went God mode. It is what it is. Picked up a loss there. Definitely a good effort by Busta, but just didn't really have enough in the tank to actually beat him. In fact, you actually looked at Zandschulp's stats. He didn't get broken in the entire match, which is kind of shocking because Boost is a good returner, but Zandschulp was just a phenomenal player for that given day and picked up a loss there. So is what it is, picked up a loss for the lock. For the dog, lost with Cilic in straight sets at plus 165. Dared Kaza to actually step up after being a mess for most of the year. Cilic actually went up 3-0 in the match. And then after that, it all went downhill. So Cilic once again went up 3-0 in the first set, then proceeded to lose the next 5 games, and then they ended up losing the second set 6-4. So either way, point is Kaza lost the first 3, then he eventually won 12 of the last 15 games. Complete domination, really no way around it. So either way, picked up a loss that was really not that close for the dog. So kind of a mess there in Shanghai for us, but hopefully the Beijing sweep will make up for it. Either way, though, going to recap quickly what happened in the first round of Shanghai. Getting into the matches on Wednesday, mentioned before, Zandschulp was very good, beat Busta in straight sets. Ended up seeing Opelka lose to Rinderknich. Opelka's been in really bad form lately, so not exactly a shock there. Yibing got his first ATP win of the season, I believe, after battling some injuries. He ended up winning in his home country there in China. Saw Monfils beat De Zoomer. Saw Baena lose the first set to Agut, then he came back and won in 3, which is also why he's the feature image of this episode, because he's in the second round. Point is, though, Cilic lost. Fognini outlasted Darderi. Darderi's been a mess, too, for the last couple of months. He ended up winning a title in the clay season. Been kind of a mess since. Still very young. I'm sure he'll get back into form, but Fognini ended up getting a win. Nice win there for him. Shapo got a win, beating Sonego in 2 tiebreaks. Vukic beat Mutet. Saw Manarino lose in 3. Shang won, beating Wang in straight sets. Saw Fakina beat Diallo, and that was basically it. You did see Nishikori beat Navone in 3 sets. Seemed a bit injured at the end. He was kind of hunched over, and it seemed like he might have hurt something in his leg, but Nishikori got the job done as he eventually came back and won in 3 sets. For the matches on Thursday, you saw Goffin beat Duckworth. You ended up seeing Nishioka get injured, which is unfortunate because he gets hurt all the time. But ended up seeing him get injured 6 games into the first set, which is unfortunate. So Berrettini beat O'Connell in 2 tiebreaks. Saw Mensik beat Martinez in 3. Ended up seeing Griekspoor win in 3. Besides that, you ended up seeing a lot of matches that I don't think really mattered too much. Wawrinka won. I ended up beating Perricard. Perricard has been disastrous since Wimbledon. He's been really bad. And it's not a shock to me. I've compared him to, once again, Eubanks. I see a lot of similarities, but just looking at the actual, I should say, flaws in Perricard's game, a lot of unforced errors, and he can't return. So if the bomb serve isn't fully landing, or if he's in a couple tie breaks and he really can't return, he's got problems. Wawrinka ended up getting the job done in 2 breakers, and Perricard continues to play some really bad tennis. Anyway, moving on into the actual preview of the second round, trying to think if there's anything else worth talking about. I mean, for the women's side, nothing that was too, I'd say, noteworthy. I know Goff keeps winning. I know that Sabalenka's looked pretty good too. So nothing too shocking, I should say, for the women's side. But point out, I feel like for tennis, we kind of covered it. Once again, nothing that was really, I'd say, shocking from the actual first round of Shanghai. Seemed like it was mostly straightforward. Point is, though, you had Goff winning in 3 sets as she made the China Open semis. Basically it. Sabalenka once again ended up beating Keys in the last match, but nothing else really had there. We saw Osaka get injured, though. She ended up having to retire, so we'll see if she is healthy moving forward. Time to move on, though, into the second round of Shanghai. But before that, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, because they have a lot of great items on their pick'em menu. And a reminder that they have a lot of choices for the NFL, college football, MLB, MMA, WNBA, NASCAR, and more. If you want some Game 3 options, for example, for the Mets-Brewers game, you can definitely do that. If you want some thoughts on the next round, they have options there too. They also have tennis. They have esports. They have UFC. A lot of great content for you there at Underdog. And a reminder, for the actual entry, I'm not going to do something for Thursday Night Football because that's going to start in about an hour or two. So I think I'm going to go to what I want to do for this one. You know what? I'll go with the WNBA. I'll go back to what worked in Game 2. Give me John Cole Jones lower on her 3-pointers. She hasn't really been attempting many. I think that 1.5 might be a bit too high. I'll go with the lower on John Cole 3s for Game 3 of that series. Reminder, though, when you do sign up, use the promo code SGPN to claim a special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 bonus cash on fantasy promo code SGPN. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished recapping what happened in the first round. Now it's time for the actual preview of the second round of Shanghai. A reminder, we're going to cover a decent amount of matches, but not all of them. So if you end up wanting to match, I'm not going to cover. Apologies. I just am kind of choosing randomly, but it is what it is. Point is, for the actual first match we're going to talk about, you have a matchup taking place between, where do I want to go here? We'll go with Paul and Fognini. We'll go with that one first. So for this one, Paul's a massive favorite, about minus 1,200. For the actual money line for Fognini, you have around 750. For the spread, you have minus 5.5 for Paul, plus 5.5 for Fognini. The over/under is around 19.5. Now, they actually faced off earlier this year. People might have forgotten, and you ended up seeing Paul win that one in the French Open, as he ended up winning 6-1, 6-0, 6-2. Absolute bloodbath. Now, Paul in the first round didn't play. He had a bye, obviously, fresh off the loss to Makic in Tokyo. As for Fognini, got the job done against Darderi, who has not been great lately. He was in pretty bad form, as he ended up losing in the first round of the U.S. Open to Makic, lost in Chengdu to Safulin, lost in Beijing to Rinderknech, and he ended up beating Darderi. Now, the thing is, I think Paul's going to win. Obviously, gave him out to win the quarter. However, 5.5, I am wondering if that spread's a bit high. I think Fognini can hang in there for maybe a set or two, but I think you're looking at 5.5 at plus money, because you might be able to find a 6 in there, or maybe even a 6.5 at like minus 130, maybe minus 140. Probably not. You could probably find a 6 out there somewhere. I'm going to lean Fognini plus the games here. I get that Paul's better than him, but it feels like a massive spread. I think that Fognini can hang in there. We know Paul hasn't played on the courts here yet, so I do think Fognini might have a bit of an edge early on. Maybe Paul's a bit rusty, trying to adjust to the actual courts here. But I'm going to go with Fognini plus the games. I think Paul's going to win, but I do think 5.5 at plus money is pretty appealing for the actual price point. So I'll link the Fognini in this one. Not going to bet it, but I think that the spread is a bit high, and I like the plus money. Give me Fognini to at least keep one set competitive and to cover this spread. Moving on to the next matchup. Going to look at a matchup. Where do I want to go with this one? For the next one, going to go to a matchup between Baez and Monfils. So for this one, Monfils is a favorite, decent favorite, about minus 289. You have Baez at around plus 239. For the actual spread, minus 3.5 for Monfils, plus 3.5 for Baez, and the over-under for games around 22.5. For the actual set wagering, minus 1.5 sets is even money for Monfils, plus 1.5 sets for Baez, minus 130, and the over 2.5 sets is plus 150. You might remember they faced off last year in the French Open, which was a massive comeback by Monfils as he was down a ton. I think it was 4-0 in the final set, but he came back and won. Point is that they have not played since, so Monfils has been playing decently lately. Saw him beat Schwartzman in the first round of the U.S. Open, then lost to Ruud in a tough 4-setter. Lost to Medvedev in Beijing. No real fault of his own, just Medvedev being better, and then he ended up beating De Zoomer in the first round comfortably. For the actual path for Baez, he really hasn't done much. Saw him lose in Cincinnati to Thompson in the second round, lost to George in the first round in Winston-Salem. Saw him beat Darderi in 4, then he lost to Griekspoor with a retirement there. Then he lost to Felix in the Davis Cup. So he really hasn't played much tennis over the last month or so. But based on the overall form and the overall, I'd say, comfortability on hard court, I got to go Monfils here. I think that Baez has been a really underwhelming player post-clay season, which is not exactly a total shock, because I know that he's a clay expert compared to the other surfaces, but I do think that Monfils is the better hardcourt player, and I do think he looked pretty good in the first round. I think Baez and Monfils will struggle to actually hold, so I don't mind the over and breaks here if you want to go for props. But I think Monfils will outlast Baez. I think Monfils has the overall firepower and the overall court coverage to make life difficult for Baez on his, I'd say, one of his least favorite surfaces. I'd say grass is probably his least favorite, but the point is Baez is not a great hardcourt player despite winning a hardcourt title last year. I think that Monfils is better. I'll go for the value. Give me Monfils minus the 1.5 at around even money for sets. Moving on to the next match. Going to look at a matchup between Boo and Mickelson. Should be fun. Mickelson is around minus 170, give or take. I'm just trying to find the exact price on this book. He's around minus 160 on this one. Boo is plus 140. The game spread plus 2.5 for Boo, minus 2.5 for Mickelson. The over-under is around 22.5. Set spread here, you have Mickelson in straight sets at plus 155. Boo to win a set is minus 185. For the over 2.5 sets, you have plus 135. Now, Mickelson's been fine so far this season. However, the question does remain, after losing in the final in Winston-Salem to Sonego, he hasn't really done that much. He made a pretty decent run there in Tokyo, went through qualifying, ended up beating Tsitsipas, then he ended up beating O'Connell, but he lost to Makic in straight sets. Point is, though, besides that, he really hasn't done much. So I think you're looking at a guy who is a bit overvalued, but Boo's been good lately. We saw him in Beijing make it to the semis, lost to Sinner, but he beat Rublev and Musetti. Good showing there. Also beat Cheng. I know it was off a title, but still a good win there. Saw him in Hangzhou. He beat Kukushkin, lost to Zhang in straight sets, who's still a pretty good player. Saw him beat Kashanov, though, in the first round of Hangzhou. So overall, I think Bu's in good form, and I like the fact that he is Chinese, which should give him the home country advantage. Mickelson, though, has not exactly been in great form lately. I think he's fine. You can make the argument that Mickelson has the court coverage to make life difficult for Bu because of his length, but he's not a good server. I think that Bu is a pretty underrated server, and I think that you might end up seeing a marathon breakout. I like the over. I don't mind the over 2.5 sets here at around plus 135. I think I'm going to lean to the dog here, though. I like the price. I think that Mickelson at minus 160 is a bit steep. I think there's some value on Bu. Don't mind the games. Plus 2.5, but I am going to go with the plus 140 money line instead as my main thought for that matchup. Looking at the actual comments here, I see Monzi telling me that he likes the Mets under. It's an elimination game. I don't mind that angle. I mean, you're looking at each pitcher having a quick leash, and you might be able to see a decent amount of bullpen, for better or worse. You're going to love the under until the Mets bullpen comes in. So we'll see what happens there. But I see a lot of people arguing about the Brewers and the Mets. For this game, I mean, I have a player prop. I have Quintana under the 2.5 earned runs, just based on the potential short leash you might have. But for the sake of the game, it could go either way. Maybe it's a live betting game. You kind of just fade whatever team's winning early because you don't trust either bullpen to do anything in the series. But I'm going to lean Mets if I had to go for the actual side. I think that Quintana with more playoff experience, and maybe the Brewers, who just have a history of choking in the playoffs. The Mets, I get that they lost game 2. They really should have won the game. I thought they outplayed Milwaukee for like 7 innings. They just couldn't get a guy. They couldn't get a clutch hit with guys on base. So if that ends up being the case once again, they're screwed. But they had guys on base. That counts for something. Maton blew the entire game in 1 inning, but the Mets were in good shape. They were about an inning or 2 away from winning. Don't mind the Mets play at plus money, give or take, but I think that for the matchup, it's going to be close. Don't mind a potential 3-2 final either way. If you want a fun niche prop, though, no home run in the game is like 5-1, which is interesting because both guys, starting pitcher-wise, Myers and Quintana, have been good at limiting home runs. And now I'm not sure how long they're going to pitch. You might end up getting into some trouble if Trino goes deep again. But no home run might be worth a look there at around 5-1. Either way, though, getting back into the second round preview for Shanghai. Moving on to the next matchup, you have Fees fresh off his title in Tokyo against Baena, the guy on the featured cover photo here. Either way, for the actual matchup, you have Fees as a massive favorite. Fees is around about minus 350, give or take. You're looking at him around minus 300 on this book. You have Baena at around plus 246. For the spread, minus 4 for Fees, plus 4 for Baena. For the spread here, you have Fees minus 1.5 sets at minus 120. You have Baena at around plus 1.5 at minus 110. The over 2.5 sets is plus 160. Now, for this matchup, Fees should win. We know Fees is definitely the kind of guy that is in great form because we saw him win a title and he beat a bunch of good players in Tokyo. However, we've seen him be very streaky this season, and we saw him battle some cramping and some overall stamina potential concerns after all the marathons he had in the event. So I have to wonder about fatigue because he played a lot of tennis in Tokyo. He had a bye in the first round, but still, is this the spot where you blindly fade the guy off a title and he potentially no-shows the match? It's possible. I think Fees should win, but I'm going to play it in the middle. I'm going to go with Baena plus the games. I think that Fees can definitely get the job done with the actual spread here because he's more talented than Baena on hardcore. But Baena is a pretty tough guy to play. He's annoying because he keeps a lot of balls in play. And with the potential stamina concerns and maybe the overall, I can't say sobriety concerns with Fees because he won a title. Maybe he was drinking for the last couple days. But I think Baena is an overall matchup. Is not the easiest matchup you want in your first match post-title, because I do think that Baena will be able to make the match extremely physical. I think he'll be able to keep the ball in play and make a lot of long rallies out of nothing. So I'm going to link to the games here. I'm going to take the games. I think that Fees probably wins, but I do think post-title, when he had a pretty rough year, it's a pretty good letdown spot for Fees as far as I'm concerned. So I'll go with the contrarian play. Give me Baena plus the games here to hang in there, maybe to even win a set. But Fees, we know, can no-show matches. We've seen it all year. He was great for a week. I'm not going to suddenly crown him as being the consistent top 20 guy. I think he's not there yet. So I'll go with Baena plus the games to keep it interesting, which is why the line does feel like it's been dropping over the last few days. Moving on to the next matchup. I'm going to skip a couple matches, by the way, that I'm going to save for the end of the show. For this one, though, going to go to Makic and Fokina. Now, for this one, pretty fun match on the books. You are looking at Makic at around minus 167. For Fokina, you have around plus 147. For the games, minus 2.5 for Makic, plus 2.5 for Fokina. The over for games is 22.5. For the set spread here, minus 1.5 sets for Mock just plus 155. Fokina to win a set is minus 185, and the over 2.5 sets is around plus 130. They had one career meeting. It was actually a walkover, so they never actually faced off against each other. A point is, though, we have seen good form from Makic. We saw him get injured in the Davis Cup right after the U.S. Open, where he made a pretty good run. But he got injured in the matchup against Alcaraz, had to retire. Then he retired against Papiron. But he was good in Tokyo. Saw him beat Papiron. He got in the revenge match, beat Paul, and ended up beating Mickelson before losing to Humbert. But he's been good. So the question is, do I think that Fokina can be trusted? Because we know that he's talented. Fokina, in my opinion, talent-wise, is still a top 15 player in the world. He's just a head case. And I do think with him being untrustworthy, had a very tough match against Diallo in the first round, which he did win 7-5, 7-6. Not exactly in great form. I think I like the over, though. I think Fokina can look good for a set, and then I am concerned about his overall consistency. Makic, though, has been dropping sets lately. Saw him drop a set in a couple of matches in Tokyo, dropped 2 sets to Humbert, dropped a set to Paul, dropped a set to Papiron. So once again, not really in great form in terms of winning 2-0. I'll go with the over. I think Fokina can keep it interesting. I think Fokina can once again win at least one set here. Give me the over in this one, but the over 2.5 sets is a good price in my opinion at around plus 130. Moving on to the next match, you have we'll go with the main guys here. For this one, you have a matchup between Alcaraz and Shang. For this one, Alcaraz around minus 1,000, and Shang is around plus 700. For the game spread, you have 5 for Alcaraz, minus 5, minus 120. You have plus 5 for Shang at around even money for the over-under 20.5. For the set spread here, obviously big price here. Alcaraz is minus 260 to win in straight sets, and Shang is plus 200 to win a set. And for the over sets, you have 2.5 at plus 220 on the over. So Shang's been good. We know that he won a title. Then he lost immediately in his next match, but he was fatigued. It happens when you win a title. Your first ever one. It's a natural letdown spot, so I'm not going to overreact to that one. Saw him end up winning the first round, though. Thought he looked pretty good, and I do think the crowd advantage will help. But Alcaraz is well liked, so you could argue that it will be somewhat split more than it should be. For this one, though, I mean, Alcaraz has played a bunch of tennis. You're thinking of the actual calendar, and he went from the U.S. Open losing early to the Davis Cup to the Laver Cup, then to Beijing. He won in Beijing on Wednesday morning, and now he's playing Friday. So not really any time off for Alcaraz. It is a pretty natural potential letdown spot, or fatigue spot's the word I'll use. I think Shang can keep this interesting. I'm not saying he's going to win. I think Alcaraz is better, but I think you're looking at Shang, who's still a very solid player, and I do think that he is top 10 upside in his home country, but he's also rested, and he's healthy, which is important. So I am going to go with Shang, plus the games here. I don't mind a 5.5 if you could find it, but simply put, based on the spot, it's a really bad spot for Alcaraz and Sinner. It's worse for Alcaraz because he was in the Laver Cup, where Sinner didn't even bother. So at least he was off for an extra week or so. But Alcaraz has played a bunch of tennis for the last few weeks. And I am wondering, first match back in Shanghai, is he going to, I don't want to say no-show, but is he going to start off slowly and try to go from there? I could see that happening. I don't mind Shang to keep it interesting. I think Shang's very good. I think that he will also make the match physical. So I'm going to go with Shang plus the games here to keep it interesting. I think he'll lose. Maybe he wins a set, though. But I think that Shang getting 5 or even 5.5 is a pretty good price. So I'm going to go with that as a main thought for that matchup. Moving on to the last match we're going to talk about. You have a matchup between Sinner and Daniel. For this one, Sinner is a massive favorite. Sinner is about minus 5,000. Daniel's around plus 1,550 for the actual game spread, minus 6.5 for Sinner, plus 6.5 for Daniel. The over-under in games is set at 17.5. The over is minus 131, though. The under is plus 111. For the actual set spread here, if you do want it, massive price, though. Sinner in straight sets is by no surprise minus 750. Daniel to win a set is plus 475. For the over 2.5 sets, you have plus 550. Now, similarly to Alcaraz, a lot of tennis. Did end up making the final in Beijing. 3-set marathon with a breaker, then had 1 day off, or basically 1 full day off, and then had to go to Shanghai to play in this event. So, not the greatest spot for Sinner. He is laying a lot of games. Did face off in the Australian Open, though, a couple years ago. Daniel did win a set, so we'll point that out. Now, Daniel recently, though, has been not great. Saw him beat relative unknown in the first round, as he was able to beat Gerasimov in 3, lost to O'Connell in straight sets, beat Kovacevic in 3 in Tokyo, saw him lose to Kachmazov in straight sets in the second round, did beat Sonego in the first round. Not really in great form, but once again, it's a lot of games. And Sinner was not exactly comfortable in a lot of that Beijing tournament. We saw him drop a set in the first 2 rounds. Dropped a set in the first round to Jari, who's been really bad, and dropped a set to Safulin. He probably should have dropped a set to Leheshko as well and buoyed some chances. So Sinner could have easily dropped at least one set in all 5 matches. But I think for this one, I'm not going to bet it because Daniel is really not a good matchup, at least for his sake, against Sinner, because he has no firepower at all and he can't really serve. So I am going to point out it's not a good matchup for Daniel at all. But I do think that for 6.5 games, for a guy that's played a lot of tennis, who was not dominant in any of those matches in the last event, I think I got to go with the games here for Daniel. I think he can keep it close. Once again, 6-3, 6-3 is a straightforward win, regular, standard, solid showing by Sinner. He doesn't cover. It's 6.5. That feels like a massive line to me. I'll go with the games. I think that Daniel can keep it close, at least somewhat close. Give me a loss by like 5 games, maybe a 6-3, 6-4. But 6.5 is a bit high, so I am going to go with the dog in that one. Before we get into the lock and dog picks, do want to look at the actual comment section one more time. I see Beans asking, when I say plus the games, I do not mean player games. I mean spread. So player games, I just say team total. Team total is that person, for example, like 11.5, 12.5. That's team total. So that's how I look at it for player games. For the actual plus the games, I mean the actual spread. So if you see a spread of like -3 or +3, plus the games means I'm taking the +3. That's what that means. So it's not a team total. That's the spread. I will lean to Daniel plus the 6.5 games. That's plus the games. Anyway, time to get into the actual lock and dog picks for the second round. But before we do that, I want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Rhythm, because SGPN's proud partner Rhythm is the #1 AI-powered sports betting platform that provides bettors of all levels the ability to build custom predictive models in seconds and get predictions on money lines, spreads, totals, and props. Build your own model, copy one of the top performing models from the leaderboard, or press build the model for me. And Rhythm will help you once again with giving you every game predictions and player props. And a reminder, they have a bunch of stats, research, trend analysis to give you even more betting insights. And they also give you a free trial, 7-day free trial by going to sportscampus.com/rhythm, sportscampus.com/RATHMM. We're also brought to you by BetUS. We're brought to you by a sportsbook that's one of the best in the business. And BetUS has been around for more than 30 years. Easily deposit with crypto and get lightning fast payouts. US players are always welcome. A reminder that you can sign up and deposit $100 and have a chance to win a 1960 Ford Mustang. Nice throwback car giveaway here. And also, if you use our link when you sign up, you can get a 1 to 25% deposit bonus on your first 3 deposits. With sportscampus.com/BetUS, sportscampus.com/BetUS, promo code SGPN, so then we send you BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the second round of the Shanghai Masters. Now it's time for the actual lock and dog picks. For the lock, I said before I was skipping a couple matches because I was going to save that for the end of the show. Going to go back to the Shapovalov and Shelton match, and they faced off 2 times this season. You know where we're going. Give me the over. 22.5 games, -139. It is juicy. If you want 23.5, I don't hate it. Do think 7-6, 6-4 is a realistic scoreline, though, so I am going to go with the 22.5 instead. But these guys are good servers, and they are really not great returners. Plus, you are looking at the 2 matchups in the head-to-head this year. Both meetings were absolute wars. So they faced off in Wimbledon this past year. That went 5 sets. So definitely not an easy win by Shelton by any means. Faced off again in Washington, actually, in D.C. You might remember that Shelton had match point, and Shapo got disqualified. He had to forfeit the match. But at the actual scoreline, when it was match point, it was 7-6, 6-6. So they faced off on hard court a couple months ago. That matchup went to 2 tie breaks, and you can get there if it goes to 3 sets anyway. But Shelton, we know, is not a great returner, and Shapo has not been great lately, but he was good in his first match. Did go to 2 tie breaks against Sonego, which he won. Good win there, though. We know Shapo, when he's on, is still a dangerous hard court player, a lot of firepower. Both guys, though, have a lot of firepower, a lot of questionable selection. And I think with that being the case, you're looking at history repeat itself. But when 2 guys have faced off against each other and you have seen 2 high-scoring overall matchups, I am going to assume the same thing happens the third time around. So I am going to go with the over 22.5 games here for Shapo and Shelton at around -139 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to a matchup between Jari and Yibing. Yibing being the home country guy, did win ATP title last year. The issue has been injuries. He can't stay healthy. Now, he was good in the first round, ended up winning his first match on the ATP level, I think, all year. Looked pretty good against Nagal. Nagal, though, has been really, really bad, so not going to overreact to that win. But still, the point is a win's a win, and he did stay healthy. We know Yibing is definitely a top, in my opinion, 50 player or so if he stays healthy. So I do think that he's undervalued, at least based on his overall rating. But we saw him stay healthy against Nagal. He looked good, 6'3", 6'3". Jari, though, had a bye somehow, despite being terrible this entire season. But Jari has been really bad for the last couple months. He has lost in 9 of his last 10 matches. We saw him once again struggle in the last couple matches he was in. So not a fan of the form. You are looking at Yibing being the home country guy, so the crowd support should be there. Money line's plus 113, which I think is pretty telling because ratings-wise, at least based on, I should say ranking, Jari is 28 in the world. Yibing is 564, and Yibing's only plus 113. Feels like they're giving Yibing a serious chance, and I agree. I think Yibing has the forehand talent and the overall consistency when healthy to make life difficult for Jari. We know Jari is a loose cannon. We know shot selection is poor and a ton of unforced errors. The wings tend to break down for him, and I do think that if Yibing can, I don't want to say match Jari in the firepower department, but if he can keep it close and keep the ball in play, he can outlast Jari in rallies and wait for him to self-destruct. But with the overall ranking disparity with this price, it does seem pretty telling that Yibing is very live to win it, and I do agree with it. I'll fade the guy that's lost 9 of the last 10 matches. Give me Yibing on the money line at around plus 113. So once again, my picks for the actual second round of Shanghai. The lock's going to be on the over, 22.5 games in the Shapo and Shelton match at minus 120 at minus 139. And for the dog, I am going to go with Yibing money line against Jari at around plus 113. That's going to wrap it up, though, for this episode. You can find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. You can find me on the NBA show, WNBA show. You can also find me on the tennis podcast, of course. And once again, you can also find me on a bunch of other shows of the network. I was on the Mothership show, the Sports Camp podcast show this past week, going through Thursday Night Football. So you can find me all over the network. But a reminder, until next time, you know where to find me. And you can also hit the like button, subscribe. And a reminder, if you're still listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, please leave a rating or review. And a reminder back once again for the third round, the round of 32 in Shanghai. Till next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.